Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really very happy to be part of this conference, and I've been listening to such interesting presentation. And I think I really need to thank Andrews and Juhi for giving me this opportunity. Well, the topic I have taken today is titled as Sacred Fluidity, Navigating Gender and Religion with emphasis on Hinduism. See, whenever we talk of Hinduism, we always think, that women do not have a space over here and they are not equal to men. But what I'm talking through this paper, one, I will take you back into history, and there were few women who negotiated patriarchy in their own terms. While there was no change in the men, the women were negotiating patriarchy, and some of their writings are so revolutionary. Whatever 30-minute permits, I will try to share some of this. And then finally, when you look at it, there is so much of fluidity in that religion. Men imagine themselves as women, and women imagine themselves as men in this religion. So all of us know, we've been discussing from afternoon, that religion is a historically transmitted system of belief which is embedded in symbols, through knowledge, power, order, and truth. And culture is also very deeply intertwined with religion, because it transmits these meanings in a different way. Now, when you look at it, we find that gender and religion are two distinct aspects of a person's personality. They are we refer to social and cultural roles, behavior, expectations, and the kind of ritual beliefs, practices which a person may have. And gender roles differ across different religion. In some it may be very rigid, in other it would be more equal and egalitarian. And but what is really important, that there is so much of diversity in each religion. It varies in practices and other aspects. Is my slide moving? Yeah. So when we look at it, every religion has varying views and beliefs about gender role, about men and women in society. Some are more patriarchal in their structure. They emphasize a lot on traditional gender roles, while other religions speak of egalitarian view and they support gender equality. And the reality is, gender and religion both are very complex and multifaceted concepts. And there is so much of a diversity in these different religions. Individuals may practice their faith in different ways. They may have different gender roles and identity. And it may vary according to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socio-economic aspects, etc. Now, if we look at Hinduism, we find that the religious belief and practices of the Hindus, one, it has taken 5,000 years to develop. And it has been so divergent that it could not constitute a coherent monolithic religious system. If we give a historical gaze to Hinduism, you cannot really call it a religious system, because it distorts the whole heterogeneous religious practices. For want of a better word, the word imagined Hinduism is more a very modern concept. Now, what is Hinduism? One, it is one of the oldest religion of humanity. It is referred to as Sanatan Dharma. Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism also owe a lot. And there is a lot of tolerance and diversity. The linchpin of this religion is truth is one and paths are many. There are many deities, but there is a single, impersonal, ultimate reality. And the philosophy is a way of life, both focusing on this world and the other world. Hinduism is also very unique because it has had no founder. There is no hierarchical clergy. There is no direct divine revelation. There is no rigidly prescribed moral code. It evolved from primitive animism to polytheism and then to monism. But what is the beauty of this is it has not rejected any of these. You can still have primitive animism, there is worship of animal, and yet you have polytheism and monism. So it has not discarded the various deities of different faiths and cult, but regarded them as manifestation of one God. So Hinduism is both polytheistic, monotheistic, and monistic. It has many gods and goddesses that are worshipped in forms which are very different and considerably distant from the Sanskritic textual depiction. Vishnu, Shiva, and Devi are the principal deities, but they have many forms. And throughout history, we have had so many different independent reform movements that have questioned the authority of the Vedas, and they have created an alternative space of religion through various ways. Now, how did Hinduism begin? I've already mentioned there is no particular founder. It started in the Indus Valley civilization about 5,000 years back. Then you had the Aryans who entered India between 4,000 to 3,500 years. And it was at this time that the Vedic tradition developed with rituals, sacred texts, social stratification. You had the Upanishads, which were written around 2,800 to 2,400. These are metaphysical philosophy. You had the Vedic tradition that developed into Hindu thought and philosophy. Now, what are the sacred scriptures? We have two major things. One is Shruti, which is heard. It is one of the oldest and the most authoritative voice. You have the four Vedas, Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Athar Veda, Yajur Veda. These consist of various myth, ritual, chants. You have the Upanishads, which are metaphysical speculation. After the Shruti, which is something which is heard, the other word is Smriti, something which we remember, or it is also called Itihasa. You have the great epic tradition, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Mahabharata includes the Bhagavad Gita, and these are the sacred scriptures. Besides this, you have Puranas, Angamas, Darshan, where you go and visit the deity and get the blessings. Now, what are the spiritual practices? You have the four yogas, which are the Karma Yoga, the path of action, which Gita propagates. You have the Gyan Yoga, the path of knowledge, which Shankaracharya and others are calling. You have the Raj Yoga, the path of meditation, and you also have the Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. But what is important is throughout this, you need a guru. A guru is very important. And it is this spiritual teacher who leads you to salvation. There is a very famous doha of Kabir that Guru Govind do khade kake lagu paye, dhanya guru jo aapne Govind diyo bataye. That in front of me are standing both my guru and God. And I don't know whose feet to touch first. Then he says, no, I will touch the feet of my guru first, because it is through my guru that I achieve God. Now, how do the Hindus worship? Like I've mentioned, Bhakti Yoga, it could be at home. You can have household shrines. It can be in the temple with the priest officiating. You have puja, making offerings and decoding deity images. You have darshan, which is seeing the deity. It is different from idol worship. Prasad, you partake in the, whatever food is being served, it is shared by everyone. Now, what are the major gods of Hindu? You have Brahma, the creator. You have Vishnu, who is the preserver. And Vishnu is found in 10 avatars, which includes Ram, which is who is featured in the Ramayana. And you have Krishna, of the Mahabharata. And then you have Mahesh, the destroyer, because only after destruction does regeneration come in. So Shiva is seen as a constructive destruction, the transformer. He appears as Shiva Nataraj, the whole lord of dance and creation is through him, and he is worshipped with Parvati and son Ganesh, who is seen as the elephant-headed remover of obstacle. Now, what about the women? You have Devi, the feminine divine. Parvati is the divine mother. Lakshmi is the goddess of fortune. And then you have Durga, who is the protectors. And Kali is seen as a destroyer. So you have these different gods and goddesses that are worshipped. But what is important, plus you also have 330 million other deities. Now, what is important is all these deities are but manifest forms, attribute and functions of the impersonal Brahma. And there is so much of a power of Devi, because sometimes, goddesses are represented as consorts, but then goddess is also represented as Shakti. Shakti is power, the feminine for noun. And according to this view, without Shakti, the gods will become powerless. So ultimate power is of the universe is with Devi, the great goddesses. And what is interesting is, we as human beings are also a manifestation of God. We are not human beings having spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That are thou. This sums up the philosophy of Hinduism. And Hinduism recognizes the pervasiveness of all divine. Why is it that we worship, the trees, nature, stones? Because we see a part of the divine in all these. And what is important is, you always see the country also as a goddess, motherland, never as a fatherland as in Germany, because we recognize that the land we live in nurtures us lovingly like our mother. And Indians worship India as Bharat Mata. Janani Janma Bhumischa Svargapi Garayasi. Sri Ram said that one's mother and motherland are superior to heaven. And then there is this concept of Ardhanareshwar. Shiva and both Vishnu are represented as both half man and women. In the Vaishnava tradition, you see Mohini. In the Shaiva tradition, you also have the concept of Ardhanareshwar. And feminine ecology and environmentalism is so important, because the entire universe is alive. It pervades with the supreme body of the God. The earth is referred to as Prithvi, and nature is Prakriti, the feminine. We refer to all our rivers with, feminine names, Ma Ganga, Ma Saraswati, because rivers are manifestation of feminine deities. We also worship the grains, because grains are manifestation of Devi Annapurna. Trees and forests are abodes of feminine deities. You have sacred groves, sacred trees, sacred plants everywhere. Mother cow becomes the symbol of motherly love and is a sacred animal. Now, if you read the Devi Shuktam, there are a lot of conflicting and diverse views. This is one of the hymns of the Rig Veda, and it declares that this divine energy is the essence of universe that has created all matter and consciousness. It is eternal, infinite, it is metaphysical, it is Brahma, soul, the supreme cell of everything. So here, in the Devi Shuktam, women is celebrated as the most powerful, most empowering force. Even in the Upanishad, Shastras, Puranas, you have Devi Mahatyam, Devi Bhagavad Puran, you have a lot of this similar sentiments being echoed. But then what happened over a period of time, you had so many different sages that started writing. And then, as we move into history, the position of women starts, ranging from feminine leadership to the, being the highest goddess, to one limiting her role as an obedient daughter, housewife, and mother. And some of the duties that are prescribed to women, especially if you read the Manusmriti, that a woman can never be independent. This is what he writes, that a father protects her during childhood, her husband during her youth, and when she becomes old and a widow, it is the son who protects her. And then, but in the same book, he writes that women must be honored, and where women are revered, there gods rejoice. But where they are not, they will not be any, the sacred rites or whatever rituals you perform, they will not bear any fruit. So while it recognizes marriage is a very important institution, while the primary duty of the women is to help her husband in performing these duty, continuing the family tradition, giving birth to children, and mostly recognizing that sons are very important, we find that all these diverse texts come up with such conflicting views of women. In fact, if you read the Rig Veda, these are one of the earliest texts that have been compiled, and 1% of the hymns of Rig Veda are attributed to women philosophers. You have lots of debates which are represented, Gargi and Maitre in the Upanishad. And these women are far more powerful than the ones which these sages are talking about, women being an obedient wife, daughter, and mother. And there is, though marriage for a woman was equated with a religious tradition, just as you perform the Upnayana Sanskar, marriage is also a very important religious ritual whereby the women has to perform household duties, especially preparing the worship of the sacrificial fire. There are lots of domestic duties which are there, and there is a lot of importance given to procreation for women. And we find that, there are so many other representation. If you read the Shankya philosophy, it talks about Purusha, the indestructible male, aloof and perfect. And Prakriti, the feminine power, which is the manifest world, defined as female, which needs attention to serve others. And, there is a lot of dichotomy which is represented, the Purush Prakriti dichotomy. And yet what we find is that in spite of all these cultural stereotypes which came, there is a long history which goes behind it. We find the philosophical messages are undeniable, that truly religious man must abandon the world and women to attain his goal. Women are still seen as being an impediment to reach salvation. There are 2 points. One is Kanak Kamini. Kanak is gold, identifying possession. If you have possession, you cannot reach salvation. And the second is women who are seen. And then, there are so many other practices. There is no divorce which is allowed. Women really do not have any property rights except the Stridhan which they get at the time of dowry. And earlier, some of the sacred texts say that if the husband dies, a woman has to commit sati. She could never remarry. And in many traditions, women are seen as a curse and not to be seen in public. And there was an encouragement of child and public marriage. But then, when you look at, there were so many movements from time to time that questioned all this. They did not really accept it. And the Bhakti movement is one such movement from 13th century to 17th century, where they are talking of, where you have a lot of women who come forward. Though this was a movement which came up in 7th and 8th century in South India, it's a very good example of diversity of the Indian culture, because it appears in different parts. They were using the local language. You had a movement in the Andhra, which was using Telugu, in Tamil Nadu, Tamil, Kerala, Malayalam, Gurumukhi in Punjab, in Kashmiri, they are using the Kashmiri language. And yet, there was a common thread that ran throughout this movement. What is interesting is, look at the period, 13th century in India, there were no connections as such. People took such a long time to travel, and yet they were all speaking almost the same language. In their own way, they were questioning the existing system of religion and promoting egalitarianism. In North India, this movement spread in 2 streams. You have the Nirgun Bhakti and the Sagun Bhakti. The Nirgun Bhakti, they were talking in terms of an eternal, all-pervading, omnipresent divine consciousness. Sagun Bhakti, they were talking of a manifestation of God. And you have Nirgun saints like Kabir, Nanak, etc. In Western India, it started in Gujarat in 15th century with Narsim Mehta. You have Sant Loyal, Sant Toral. In Maharashtra, you have the Sant tradition, Bahinabai, Chokkamela. In Eastern India, you have Chaitanya. Assam, you have Shankar Deva. Now, this is the map of India where you can see the different centers where this movement arose from different periods. Now, what is very interesting is, many of the males who were part of this movement, they were all questioning caste. They were questioning the Brahmin. They did not want the rituals. They did not want the language to be Sanskrit. They wanted a lot of freedom. But then when it came to women, women were not part of their agenda. And their attitude towards women was that, they did not include women as part of this chain. They continued to imagine women as being a impediment to their worship. They could not rise above this old age prejudice for women being a barrier to the path of salvation. And we find that they continue to live in a patriarchal society which considers a man superior and a woman subordinate. So to them, women was only a maya, an impediment in the path of bhakti. They continued to see the women's status in terms of her family vis-a-vis husband, and she had no worth outside the family institution. Now, what is interesting is this was the attitude of men, but then bhakti also created a space for women, because you had a large number of women who came out, they practiced bhakti, they were very outspoken in their own word. They used this space to, carve out their own niche and reiterate and question the roles which women were being asked. You had so many saints, Karikale Amma, Akka Mahadevi, Muktabai, Laleshwari, Jainabai, Mirabai, Bahinabai. Now, quickly, I'll go through. Akka Mahadevi was in 12th century. She is in Karnataka, daughter of a very rich merchant. She was a great devotee of Shiva right from the beginning. Now, the land of she was supposed to be very beautiful and good looking. The chieftain of the land, Kaushika, fell in love with her, and he forced her father to get her married to him. Akka Mahadevi places three vows in front of him, and she says that one, you will let me do what I want. Second, you will not touch me against my wishes. And when, and if you break these vows, I will break this marriage. And he accepts these vows, but he cannot resist his temptation. And when this happens, Akka Mahadevi walks out. And what is very important, she's walking out in 12th century. She walks out naked. All her pictures are, you have her long hair which covers her private part. That is the ultimate sign of rebellion. She says, I'm just quoting from a poem, other men's are thorn under the smooth leaf. I cannot touch them, go near them, not trust them, not speak to them, confidence's mother, because they all have thorns in their chest. I cannot take any man in my arm but Lord white as jasmine. She refers to Shiva as Lord white as jasmine. You can confiscate money in hand. Can you confiscate the body's glory to peel away every strip you wear? But can you peel the nothingness, the nakedness that covers the veil to this shameless girl wearing the jasmine Lord's light of mourning you feel? Where is the need for cover and jewel? When you yourself call yourself as a shameless girl, what more is there? How more can you be insulted or spoken others? So she just walks out naked. She's least bothered. And all these women, they posited those relationships into God. God becomes their lover, their friend, their husband. And, they do away with the worldly husband. Now, Akka Mahadevi is 12th century Karnataka. Lal Ded is in 14th century in Kashmir. She's married at the age of 12 to a Brahmin family named Nika Bhatt. We have so many legends that, she used to weave silk, which was so beautiful, like a lotus top. Her mother-in-law troubled her so much, she would make a hole in the pot and ask her to go and fill water. By the time she reached home, the water would be finished, and again she would make her run. Now, Lal Ded says, love mad. I, Lala, started out, spent days and nights on the trail. Circling back, I found teachers in my own house. What brilliant luck, I said, and hugged them. Wrapped up in yourself, you hid from me. All day I looked for you, and when I found you hiding inside me, I ran wild, playing now. So ultimately she's so fed up that she too walks out naked. Imagine in Kashmir in 14th century and Akka Mahadevi in 12th century. And you have pictures of Lal Ded, her belly increases in its size and it covers her private parts. And she also falls in love with Shiva. Mirabai is someone who's a pan-Indian figure. Many people know about her. She is in end of 15th century, beginning of 16th century. We also know that as a young girl, she saw marriage procession going, and she keeps troubling her mother, saying, who is my bridegroom going to be? Her mother just picks up a statue of Krishna and says, look, this is going to be your bridegroom. And from that day, Meera becomes so devoted to Krishna. She's married into the royal family where they did not worship Krishna, but they worship Shakti. She refuses to consummate this marriage. They try to kill her. They try to poison her with snake. They send her a drink which is poisoned. And yet, she is able to survive all that. Sahajobai is again, born in 1683. You have so many of her verses where she talks about her difficult life, how her life is so hard. She has to grind corn, carry water, sweep, and she can only walk the Guru's path unless she is a warrior. You have other two women from Gujarat, Devalabai and Gaurabai. They have, they were Brahmin child widows. They came from very poor families. And when, after becoming widows, they become the Sishya or the followers of Dadu Guru Bhagwan, who was a devotee of Rama. And they also composed a lot of these verses and Ramayana. Saryobai is again a 14th century Marathi poetess. One color now, one color you and me. I look at you, Panduranga. They refer to their god as Panduranga. It's a form of Dattatreya, Krishna combined with Vishnu. And look, no, you, not me. This body, Sohaya says, who's being seen? Who is doing the seeing? And then she says, you say some bodies are untouchable. She came from the untouchable class. Tell me what you say of the soul. If menstrual blood makes me impure, tell me who was not born of that blood. This blood of mine fertilizes the world. Ganga Sati is another very interesting women from Gujarat. And, you have a lot of oral tradition related to her. She is married to Kaluba, who is, one of the chieftain of a village in Saurashtra. Now, what happens, according to Kaluba, her husband is such a big saint that once a cow dies in the village, and many of the villagers force her husband, Kaluba, saying that you bring back this dead cow to life. And he has such powers that he's able to revive this cow. But then Kaluba thinks that, if today I have revived one cow, tomorrow all these people are going to be after me and they will be forcing me to perform all these kinds of deeds. So he decides to take samadhi, to kill himself. And Ganga Sati also wants to commit sati. But then he says that, no, you will not commit sati because I have given you so much knowledge. And you will pass on this knowledge to our daughter-in-law. Here is a first example in history where a mother-in-law is passing all her knowledge to her daughter and Panabai. And there are lots of writings of Panabai also. There is again a very important saint called Sant Toral. She is a Kanti woman. She's married to again another chieftain, Sansatya. She's supposed to be very beautiful. And every day they would have a, religious ceremony in their house. At the end of it, there would be a prasad. And it was well known that whatever prasad she had, it would be distributed equally to everyone and nothing was left. But one day she finds that one portion of that prasad is left. And so, she calls her husband and they say, we know somebody is hiding. Who is there? Because one portion of the prasad is left. And then they find that, there is Jaisal is a big dacoit who is hidden. Now, Jaisal had taken a vow that he is going to take 3 things in his life. One is Tati, which was a famous sword. He had acquired that. Toli was a famous horse, a mare. He had also acquired that. And the third was this Saint Toral, who's already married. And when he tells this to her husband, the husband very happily says, okay, you can take my wife. Now, there is a lot of legend and oral history behind it that maybe, she had come to reform him. And Jaisal had come to reform him. And they both travel by boat. And when they are crossing the Kutch region, there's a huge storm and, Jaisal start crying because he's so terrified that he's going to die. But Toral is so calm and she addresses him. And then she says, okay, tell me about your life. Then Jaisil starts telling her how many women he has murdered, how many women he has raped, how many women he has killed, how much gold he has stolen. And as he narrates his story, the storm starts subsiding, and Toral has a lot of influence on him, and he changes. Another very interesting figure is Jana Bai. Her period is 1298 to 1315. She is, she is from Maharashtra. They used to write poetry called Abhang, and her life is also very difficult. She is a maid servant in that house. All her poetry is of the working class. She serves everyone. She's sweeping, cleaning, serving everyone, but there is nobody to look after her. There are so many of her poems. She says, one day, I did not get time to even comb my hair. There were lice in my hair. And then her God comes and he takes out lice from my hair, applies oil. Bahinabai is the only woman from Maharashtra who lived in the 17th century, and she has written an autobiography. She's married at 3 years old to a man called Ratnakar Pathak, who is 30 years old. Obviously, for him, it's a second marriage. For her, it's a first marriage. But then, she's a child. She starts her autobiography when she's 11 years old. And she says, I have not known one day of happiness. She talks about so many times she thinks of committing suicide. She's so unhappy. Her husband beats her. She talks about beating. Now, I'll just read out some of the poems about these women. Akka Mahadevi, she talks about the constant conflict which she has. Husband inside, lover outside. I can't manage them both. This world and the other, I can't manage them both. Oh Lord, white as jasmine. I cannot hold in one hand both the round neck and the long bow. And then she says, there is so much of disdain for the earthly husband. I love this handsome one. He has no death, decay, or form, no place or side, no end nor birthmark. I love him, oh mother, listen. So Lord, white as jasmine is my husband. Imagine 12th century, she's writing, take these husbands who decay and die and throw them into your kitchen fires. Meera says, friend, marriage of these worlds are false. They wipe out of existence. Wed my indestructible one. The serpent death cannot devour. And then she says, I constantly get up, go to the temple, dance, snapping my fingers. I do not follow the norms. As an eldest daughter-in-law, I have thrown away the veil. Pad ghunguru band mera nachi re. Log kahe mera hui bavari. Saas kahe kul nasi re. She's brought so much defame to that royal family. So, they are all aware of their being women. Bahina Bai says, the Vedas cry aloud, the Puran shout. No good comes to a woman. I was born with a woman's body. How can I attain the truth? They are foolish, seductive, deceptive. Any connection with a woman is disastrous. If I have a woman's body so harmful, how will I reach the truth? And then Akka Mahadevi says, oh Shiva, when will I crush you on my picture? Best. Sant Janabai also talks about casting off the shame and selling yourself in the marketplace. So, what is interesting is, that majority of the men's agenda did not include women, but on the other hand you had women who were leading very non-traditional, non-conformist life. They created a space for themselves where they were able to move out of the home, they were able to move out of their marriages. None of them had children. They wandered in all spaces, whether it is household space, public space, private space. And so we find, gender, if you read gender and how, if you read Judith Butler, she talks about gender being very complex. And in her book, Gender Trouble, she talks about it is being, totally, permanently deferred, never fully what is given at a juncture of time. And you can see, here also in the Bhakti movement, it is a performance for them. Even when the men are worshipping God, they imagine themselves as women. Gender is a fluid identity for them. It is intertwined with sexuality, and it acknowledges the negotiation of gender perception. This is my book on religious movement in medieval India. I'll give you a very interesting example. I'll just take a few minutes and conclude. Meera travels all the way to Vrindavan and she wants to meet Jeev Goswami. When she reaches the door of Jeev Goswami in front of his head, she sends him a letter, saying that, look, I want to meet you. And Jeev Goswami replies back from inside saying, I've taken a vow that I'm not going to see the face of a woman. And then, Meera replies to him. She says, I'm surprised that there is another man in Vrindavan, because there is only one man in Vrindavan, and that is Krishna. And she says, I'm surprised that there is another man, and so I don't think I want to meet this man. Then Jeev Goswami comes out, he falls at her feet. So what is very interesting is there is a lot of gender fluidity in their whole writing. Unlike the rigid gender binaries, we find that Hinduism recognizes the gender identity can be shaped by individual's will and perception. It is not seen as a immutable biological fact, a malleable construction, but which can be altered. And Hindu mythology acknowledges this fluidity, and it invites them to explore deep layers of their own identity. Kabir says, my beloved, I'm your slave. You are my husband. See, he is imagining himself as a woman, the savior of the poor. Come shower your blessings to me. And then Dasame says, if they see breast and long hair coming, they call it a woman. If they see beards and whiskers, they call it a man. But look at that self that hovers in between is neither a man nor woman. Akka Mahadevi says, suppose you cut a tall bamboo into two, make the bottom piece a woman and the head piece a man, rub them together and kindle a fire. Now tell me, is that fire a man or a woman? These are my two books on this thing, published by Cambridge Scholar Publishing UK. It's called Divine Sounds from the Heart. Thank you very much. I hope I could do justice in the 30 minutes given to me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Definitely you did all the justice. It was very, very thoughtful and very detailed. We learned a lot. We have a set of questions online as well as offline from our participants.
Definitely. Yeah.
Benju Kaki from Nepal wants to ask why who are divorced. 1 second, I lost it. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Who are divorced, not treated well. I'm experiencing it myself to the extent that if I remarry, I can't think of a Hindu groom this time.
See, I told you, these were all things which came up later on when many of the sages were writing. See, unlike Hinduism, unlike Islam, which is a contract, you marry a person through a contract and that contract can break. But unfortunately, when Islam comes to India, they are also very much influenced by the culture. Unlike that, in Hinduism, you do not marry a man for one life. You marry him for 7 lives. And you cannot, even in Christianity, it says nobody can put asunder what God has united. So they are very much against breaking of that marriage, splitting. The only way the marriage can break is through death. And then, the women is seen as being a very bad omen. See, first, you marry with such an age gap. Imagine a 3-year-old girl being married to a 30-year-old man. Obviously, he's going to die early. And then you treat the widow so badly. And, as we progressed in history, unfortunately, because of the lack of time, I could not go into it. All these developments came much later. And by the time the Britishers were coming, when many of them went back, they also had an agenda. You were talking about the glory of ancient period of Hinduism, so that you could show that the medieval period was very bad. It deteriorated the status of women. And now it is for the Britishers to really highlight all these aspects and bring about a change. So, with that kind of all the historiography which is written within that framework. And you continue to see a lot of deterioration. Everybody is writing, everybody is speaking, because one, there is no one text which you can follow. Since everybody is following a different text, there is no one way in which you can practice ritual. There is so much of a freedom that a lot of these thoughts came in. And yes, definitely, marriage was seen as something which was a permanent institution. Fine. Yeah.
Right. There's another one. In Manu Smriti, and in one of its verse, degraded wife and slave to mere objects or wealth. My question is twofolded. Number one, is it true a wife was considered property, or was a more accurate term used responsibility? Secondly, it states that the possession isn't lost due to adverse usage. So what this mean that So what does mean that in theory slavery was eternal for a dasa or dasi?
Yeah, see, I would encourage you all to read. I'm sure many of you must have read it, Gerda Lerner's Creation of Patriarchy. She talks about when the archaic states came, when, Egypt, Mesopotamia, all these big empires come, they are ruled by a class of bureaucracy, which is, they are military class. They owned all the property. And then there is a control of women. And Engels also talks about this. He says the biggest day of the mother's defeat of mother's right was when private property emerges. See, when you want to pass on your property from the father to the son, there is always enough proof to show who is the mother of the child. Those were days when surrogacy and all was not yet discovered. So you know who is the mother of the child, but how do you prove who is the father of the child? So you have to control the women so that you know that this is your child that this woman is carrying. So, with that, definitely when private property emerges, there's a deterioration in women. And here too, we are looking upon women more as a possession. In Hinduism, she is also, some say she is a property, some say it's a responsibility, some say, she is there to assist you to reach nirvana, because the husband, when he prays, he gets all the merit, and the women, when she serves, she gets all the, that is the stridham which is there for the women. So, it is for the man, it is direct benefit. For the women, it is through the man. And you have a lot of these writings which have come up in between in this period, and there are different kinds of views. But what is important is, by the time you come to 19th century, there is almost a universal acceptance that this is what the status of women is, this is what is being written, and this is what has been recognized. Fine. Yeah.